Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are back with rounds 3 and 4 of the Maritime Open, which is being held here in Summerside in Prince Edward Island. Now, yesterday I had two very difficult games. I did emerge victorious, and we are now only 9 games away from qualifying for the Candidates Tournament in 2026. However, before we get into this recap, there are a couple things that I want to go over. The first thing is that for me, playing in a lot of these open tournaments, whether it's in Louisiana, Iowa, or here in Prince Edward Island, is really a throwback to my early days in chess. As I've mentioned before, everybody has to start somewhere, and for me, when I'm playing in these events in these small cities with a limited audience, it really does remind me of back when I was 7, 8, 9 years old and I was just getting my start in chess. Now, there's one tournament in particular which this reminds me of, which is a tournament that was played in North Bay in the great year of 1997 that I competed in. So, stories aside, let's jump right into the action. Now, before we get into the game, one last little bit to begin with is I have been in a very awkward situation because about 1 week ago, there was this event, the Comet Open on chess.com, which was announced in conjunction with Perplexity.ai. Now, the reason I mention this is that this event came about at a very last moment. I had already decided I was going to play in this tournament, and the reason that this matters is because the Comet Open on chess.com has a grand prize of $45,000. Now, there are 8 qualifiers for yesterday and for today, but yesterday I actually arrived about 20 minutes late. I tried to qualify in one of the qualifiers, but I failed. So let's jump to today. Today is the last set of 4 qualifiers, and I need to find a way to play in one of the qualifiers. Now, the first one began at the exact same time as my game was starting, 10 a.m. local time, and there was a second qualifier being held at 12:15 local. So either I have to draw my game really quickly and play the first qualifier, or I have to finish my game within 2 hours and 15 minutes in order to have a shot at qualifying for the grand final of the Comet Open with $45,000 at stake. So now you guys know what's going on, and it's very weird because I've never been in such a situation before, but now we will finally get into the games. So I have the black pieces against international master Mike Ivana from Toronto, Canada, a very strong player, someone that I actually played against during one of my previous tours and some blitz games. Those may or may not be on my channel, but I had a lot of fun. Now, this opponent is very inspiring for anybody out there because he's someone who, prior to the pandemic, he was stuck around, I think, 2150, 2200, and he has jettisoned up. His rating now is close to 2400. He has been on an absolute roll. So we get e4. I play the Sicilian with c5, we get knight f3, and now I play the move knight c6. Here we get bishop b5, and this, of course, is the classic Rossolimo system, and now I play the move knight f6. Now, back in the Iowa Open, I played this same setup, and I decided to repeat it once again because I figured there's no reason not to. So we get the move knight c3. Now, this is a move that took me a little bit by surprise. My opponent had played e5 before, and after knight d5, knight c3, and knight c7, you simply get a game. But we get the move knight c3, and now I play this move knight to d4. Now, if I were in a situation where I need to win the game, I would never play this knight d4 move. I would probably play either g6 or queen to c7 here. But in this situation, I decided to go with what I've looked at recently, which is to play knight d4. We get e5, takes, and now I play the move knight d5. Now, I can tell you guys this position after knight g5 used to be considered very bad for black. I actually had this position all the way back in, I believe, 2003 in the Continental Youth Championships in La Paz, Bolivia. So this is a position that at the time was considered to be bad, but this also shows how much chess has changed because computers have proved that even positions that used to be considered bad are playable. Point in case is that last year in the 2024 FIDE Canada's tournament, we had this position between Alireza Firouzja and Fabiano Caruana. Now, unlike in that game, I decided to play this move h6 here, and we get the move knight to e4. Now, white can play the move knight takes f7, temporarily sacking the horse, but after takes, check, black has to go knight f6. If you venture up with the king here after the move c4, let's say knight b6 and d4, this king in the center of the board is very likely going to get checkmated. So, after queen f3 and knight to f6, white can trade, play check, king g6, and here white maybe has a tiny advantage with precise play, but most likely the game is going to end by repetition with check, or something like h4, queen b6, check, king h7, and once again, some kind of repetition. So, I decide to play this, and my opponent decides to play knight e4. Now, this is very important to point out in terms of why you don't want to have a lot of things on your mind when you're playing the game, because when my opponent went into this, I believe, 13-minute think. When my opponent was thinking, I already in my mind was like, okay, this game might be a very quick draw with the line that I just mentioned. If the game is drawn quickly, I have a chance to play not only in this qualifier at 12:15 for the Comet Open, but maybe even this first qualifier. So these thoughts are sort of spiraling through my head, and then after 12, I did not mean to do that. Wow, what a fail for me. What an absolute fail for me. Nonetheless, we start this recap, we keep going. So, I have all these thoughts in my mind. And when the move knight to e4 is on the board here, I basically am in a situation where it's like, this is not a move that I've looked at. I don't know what I'm supposed to play. And now because I'm thinking the game's going to end immediately, I suddenly have to shift my mental to where I have to brush aside all these thoughts about playing this qualifier at 10 a.m. And I have to focus on the game and not worry about the what ifs. So after a bit of a think, I play this move a6, we get knight c3, I trade, and now I play the move d6. Now, the way that I play this game with a6 and d6, I wasn't sure if this was the correct approach, but I figured with the two bishops here and trying to open up the center of the board very, very quickly, this should be a reasonable way to play. Now, the computer here actually prefers a move like e6. I didn't really like this move because it creates this big weakness on d6 potentially, and if you don't know exactly what to do, you could very easily get into trouble. So I play d6, we get bishop f4, and now I play bishop f5, we get queen d5, I trade, d5, queen f3, and now I play the move e6. Now here my opponent plays the move c4, and during the game I actually thought this was a very explosive move, pun intended. If white does not play c4, let's say white plays a move like h4, and I'm able to play a move like b5 here, or even c4, stopping white from releasing these double pawns, I think everything is in play, and not very easily, but there's a very high chance that I could win the game. But instead we get to move c4. Now, this is an excellent move, so if I take the pawn, white takes, and now I end up with double pawns here, and this is probably still okay after queen to d5, but it's nothing to write home about. So I go for the move g5 here, we get bishop d2, and now I play the move b5, trying to explode the center of the board. Now this move is a serious inaccuracy. I actually was a little bit scared when I played this move, but I figured you gotta do something to be very active. Computer says after bishop to e7, rook d1, and apparently the move queen c7, black is apparently fine, but this didn't really occur in my thought process. I actually thought white would castle here, and if anything, with the threats on the file, I thought that I would be in some trouble. So I go b5, and now we get the move c takes d5. This is a mistake here. White should probably play this move h4, which I did see during the game, but I thought after g4 takes and the move b takes c4, I have this big pawn clump in the center of the board, and I thought that at this point I should be doing okay. So after b5, we get pawn takes pawn, I take with the queen, we get the trade, and at this point I was very happy with the position because it's an endgame here. I can potentially try to bring the king to the center to attack this pawn on e5, and if anyone is better, I thought it should be black. And actually, the eval bar agrees with me. But as I mentioned before, in my mind, I have this issue with this upcoming online tournament here, and I was thinking to myself, it's about 11 a.m., I think, or a little bit before that. I'm going to move very quickly here when my opponent goes into a 20-minute think on this move and just blitz it out to try and get the game over with. So we get f4. I take the pawn on f4, and now we get to move castles. And I was actually very impressed when these moves occurred because it'd be very easy here to play a move like castle and queenside. And after king to d7, let's say g3, king e6, f4, takes, and a move like rook to g8. Black is probably doing very well here because after rook to f1 and a move like king to f5, the pawns are blockaded here, and black is probably close to winning. So we get f4. I take, we get castles, and the reason I was so impressed by this is now I cannot easily set up the blockade. If I play king to e7, which is apparently the top computer move, I thought after rook takes f4 and bishop g7, there was this move rook f1, rook to f8, and I actually thought here after a move like rook f5, king e6, and rook to h5, white is pressuring the pawn on h6 and f7. Maybe black is better here, but I didn't see anything obvious to win the game. Now, this is the correct line. I think that perhaps if I had a lot of time to think and I didn't have this other event on my mind, maybe I would have found it. But I already felt very much under the gun and under the pressure because of the first round game, which went too long and cost me my shot at qualifying to the grand finals of this online event. So I play rook g8 instantly. We get takes, I go rook g6, and now my idea here is to put the rook on a7, put the bishop on g7, and try to pressure this pawn on e5 as quickly as possible. Now here we got to move c3, and this move is not the best move, but once my opponent Mike Ivana found this, I kind of told myself, you know what, it's okay. If you make a draw, that's life. It's not the end of the world, and you're gonna have a chance to play in this online tournament. Now these two moments are probably the single biggest reason I did not try really hard to fight here, and I simply worked very quickly and diligently to make sure the game would end soon. Those two moves being, of course, the idea of f4 and rook f4, and now finding the move c3. The reason this move is so good is that now white can always go bishop to e3, pressuring this pawn, whereas if white plays bishop e3 here, if I get this move d4 and then say rook d8 and rook to d5, black is actually doing very, very well. So my opponent plays c3, and now I play bishop g7, we get rook f5, I play rook to e6, pressuring the pawn, we get bishop e3 here, and now I can't go d4 because white will capture the pawn. If I ever go c4 after bishop d4, white has this great wooden shield in the middle of the board, combined with a double stack on the f file, and white is doing very, very well. So I go rook to c8, guarding the pawn. Now we get rook to f1, rook c7, and the move rook to d1. Now this was a very, very nice touch, because if white tries to play rook d1 right away here, after bishop takes e5 and bishop takes h6 in this position, I can play this move pawn to d4, and I'm actually doing very, very well here. Whereas in the game, when we get the rook c7, rook d1, now if I play this move bishop takes e5, sorry, I just remember I confused my line. Sorry, guys. The reason that this is so good is if white plays rook d1 and rook takes d5 here, I have the move bishop takes c3, and if white takes this bishop, I take the bishop, and we reach an endgame where I'm up a pawn. So back to the game. So now after rook d1, after takes and rook d5, because my rook is on c7 versus c8, if I play the move bishop takes c3 here, this loses on the spot because white has bishop to f4, tickling the rook on c7, whereas in this other line here, after rook takes d5 and bishop takes c3, the rook is on c8, so bishop f4 would be staring at an empty square. So I take on e5, we get takes, I play bishop takes h2 here, and I simply offer a draw instantly, because after king takes h2, rook takes e3, takes. After a move like rook to e2, white can simply go rook c6, attacking both the pawns, and after takes, we're in a situation where if I get really fortunate, maybe I can end up with a position like this where I'm up a pawn. But even if I'm up a pawn here, this is what's well known as a theoretical draw, even though I have one extra pawn. So I offer the draw immediately with bishop takes h2. My opponent, of course, takes the draw here. We both know the name of the game. We know that it's a boring rook and pawn endgame. And with that, I give up my first draw since we began our road to the candidates at the beginning of September. Now, the good news is, in spite of giving up this draw, I would be able to play a qualifier for the Comet Open. I would, in fact, win that qualifier, meaning that I qualified for the grand finals next weekend, where I have a chance to win a grand prize of $45,000. So now with that out of the way, I can finally relax, focus on these games, and use my time when needed, and not in the back of my mind have to be worried about something else. So let's move on to the fourth game. So I make this draw, I have 2.5 points out of 3, and now I'm playing against the leader of the tournament, international master Mark Plotkin. However, I do have the white pieces in this game. So I opened with the move e4, and I was really shocked by the move g6. Now the reason this really surprised me is I expected my opponent to try and play e5 and be rock solid as he was leading the tournament, but instead he decides to play the modern. I go d4, bishop g7, and now I play the move knight f3. Now, perhaps the biggest reason I was surprised by this opening choice is because everybody who's watched my streams or videos, you know that I've played the modern probably a bazillion times online, so it's something I'm very, very familiar with. So we got this position after knight f3, d6, bishop c4, knight f6, queen e2, castles, bishop g4, and now I play the move h3. We get the trade, and now we have the move knight fd7. Now this move took me by surprise because even though I haven't studied this position in a very long time, I still do remember when I analyzed it before I had a couple of very important games, I believe in the 2017 Grand Chess Tour against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, and of course Vishy Anand, where I played this from the black side. Now at the time, I remember the line that I looked at was knight to c6, rook to d1, e5, c3, and now the move knight to d7 here. White goes bishop to e3, and after takes, knight b6, bishop b3. Black can play the move king to h8, followed by the move f5, or maybe even knight to a5, followed by bishop c2 and knight to c4. Now this is what I remember looking at all the way back, I believe in 2017. If I'm wrong, someone in the comments can let me know, but I believe it was the 2017 Grand Chess Tour in Paris where I played this against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave and Viswanathan Anand. So when my opponent played knight fd7 here, I was actually thinking to myself, this is not the line I looked at before. Now I have the option here to play rook to d1, and after knight to c6, c3, and e5, we will transpose back into the position that I just mentioned, coming out of this knight c6 move order. But because my opponent played knight d7, I thought to myself, well, now I have extra options. So with extra options, why don't I move my queen back to d1 instead of playing rook to d1? Main reason you can do that versus against knight c6 is that if you play queen d1 here, you would hang the juicer on e4. So I go queen to d1. We get to move c5. If black were to play knight c6, now I can simply go c3, and after e5, I think I can even just take the pawn. Apparently this isn't great, but I thought with the two bishops on the board here, white should be doing well. Also worth pointing out, one last point, that any position like this, if you ever take, black will take, forking the queen and the bishop, take the bishop, and now we simply have a normal position on the board with even material. So I go queen d1, we get c5, I play d5, knight a6, and now I play the move c3. Now, one of the things that I spent a bit of time on here was I did briefly consider taking the knight on the edge of the board and playing something like knight to d2, but after knight to b6, let's say c3 and a5 here, queen c2 and rook b8, I wasn't convinced that I was much better here. Apparently, computer thinks white is better, but the pawn coming to a4, no knight c4 is here. I didn't really like this position. So I play the move c3, trying to clog the diagonal for the dark square bishop, and now we get the move knight to c7. Here I play a4, trying to stop the massive queenside expansion, and we get the move a6. I play a5, we get b5, and now, of course, I go for the classic en passant with pawn takes pawn. Of course, I'm going to pronounce that correctly because right now we are in Canada, and French is one of the main languages. So I go for en passant with pawn takes pawn, we get take, and I play the move bishop d3. Now, at this point in the game, I was very, very happy because I have the two Bs, or the bishop pair here, and I also have a slightly better pawn structure as black has this weak pawn on a6. So we get the move e6. I take, we get pawn takes, and now I play the move bishop to e3, developing the bishop and trying to put pressure on the diagonal. We get queen to e7, knight d2, d5, and now I play the move knight to f3, putting this knight on a great square closer to all the action in the center. We get the move a5, I play rook to e1, and now we get the move pawn to a4. Now in this position, I decide to take the pawn, we get takes, and after bishop to g5, I feel like the opening has been a massive success for me here, because not only do I have the bishop pair against a bishop and a knight, I have the bishop pair, and black has these three pawn islands, these three pawns that are split from each other. So the three pawn islands, the bishop pair, I was feeling really, really groovy about the situation. So we get queen f7. I play rook to a3 here. Important move because if black can ever go a3 here, breaking up this pawn chain, that would open up the diagonal for this bishop. So I go rook to a3, stopping the pawn thrust, meaning that this connect to is intact. We get c4, I go bishop c2, we get queen d7, and now I play this move bishop d2. Now there's nothing wrong with this bishop d2 move, but in retrospect, seeing how the game would progress, this move is a lazy move, which is unnecessary. Now the reason I played bishop d2 here is I figured that I free the square for knight g5, I can play h4, h5 later, I can play queen e2, but I figured there's no reason to rush anything. I have the two bishops, they're weak pawns, this should be really, really easy to play. I think I should have played h4 followed by h5, trying to attack right away, but I go bishop d2 at the end of the day. We get rook to e8, and now I play the move h4. Now it's interesting to note here that knight g5 would have actually been a pretty reasonable move, but I decide to play the move h4 instead. We get queen to b5, pressuring the pawn, and now I play the move queen to b1. Now, after the game, I did a post-game analysis with my opponent, and he actually mentioned that I could have played h5 here. And in fact, seeing that this move is possible on the board makes me really, really disappointed, because after queen takes b2, apparently I can go bishop to c1, which I did not see, and after queen b5 takes, if black plays h6 here, apparently after knight to e5 with queen h5 incoming and this massive attack on the king side here, white should be winning. But again, as I mentioned with when I played bishop d2, I thought that I could basically drink my Tim Hortons coffee, relax, and there's no big rush at all. So after queen b5, I play the move queen to b1, guarding the pawn and still preparing to play h5. But now we get to move knight to f6 here, and any idea of h5 has been completely snuffed out by the queen and the knight. So I go bishop g5, we get knight to d5, and now I play knight to d4 after a long think. Now at this moment, you'll see that I have 1 hour on the clock. My opponent, Mark Plotkin, has 27 minutes. I'm thinking that I'm in great shape, but I spent a lot of time here because I could not find a concrete way to continue the game. The pawn on a4 is guarded by the rook and the queen. The knight on d5 can always go back to b6, guarding both pawns. The rook on e8 guards the pawn, and I don't have this pawn thrust with h5. So I spent a ton of time here, and ultimately I could not come up with a good idea. So I played knight to d4, queen d7, and now I play queen d1, knight b6 back, guarding this pawn on a4. Now, an interesting note here is that I did consider bishop takes knight here, and after bishop takes h5, I was not sure what was going on here in this position. Apparently, black has rook a b8, and it's a tiny advantage, but even pawn takes pawn, check, and king to h8, bishop e4, and something like rook to a7, followed by rook g7. I was kind of a little bit scared here, but as I can tell now from the computer, I am a complete idiot, because after queen c1, I have queen h6, and apparently I'm just attacking and winning the game on the king side. So I go knight d4, we get queen d7, I play queen d1, knight b6, go queen c1, knight d5, and now I play knight f3. We get queen b5, I go knight d2 here, and at this point, I'm just struggling. I'm up 20 minutes still, but I'm running out of ideas. So I play knight d2, and my idea behind this move is to potentially launch the knight to the center, but also because this bishop on c2 is not doing anything, I want to try and reroute the bishop to hit the pawn on c4, or to go to g4 and hit this pawn on e6. So we get rook a7. Now I play rook to a2, we get knight to b6, and this is probably the critical moment when knight to d7 needed to be played here by Plotkin, trying to reroute the knight to either e5 or c5 to angle for the forks with the horse. Now he's down to 17 minutes, so I can't really fault him, but he plays knight b6, simply trying to keep the defensive setup on hold here, and now I go bishop to d1, rerouting this bishop, and we get the move knight bd7. Now, once again here, it's very, very tough to come up with a move. Computer says a move like rook to a5 is best. Honestly, here already, after bishop to e2, followed by queen c2 and rook a1, it feels very, very tough to defend here for black. Black is just struggling to keep the game going, so I can't really fault my opponent for not finding this. Instead, he goes knight d7. Now I play bishop to e2, pressuring the pawn. We get knight to e5, and here I play the move queen to c2. Now, I did see that here I could have played the move knight takes pawn, but after takes, and queen to f4, hitting the bishop and the knight here, I thought that black can simply play a move like queen e5, and after takes and a3, I thought that black is very much in the game with the opposite color bishops, and white only have an extra pawn. So I go queen c2 instead with the idea of rook to a1. Now I want to win this pawn on a4 or win this pawn on c4. So here we got the move knight to d3, and now I play rook to a1, and at this point with Mark Plotkin getting super low on time here, he just collapses and goes for the hero play by playing knight to d5. At this point, it's already way too late here. If black goes rook to a8, guarding the pawn, I simply take the pawn on c4 here, and now the knight is on pre, and with the extra pawn on the queen side here and the two bishops, I will win the game without much effort. So we get knight to d5. I take, and now we get the move knight takes pawn on f2, sacking the horse. Now, when knight d5 was played, I saw this coming, but I figured that once I grab this knight and run the king to the edge of the board, I simply have an extra bishop on the board, and as long as they're not immediate checkmate, this isn't going to work. Now, to his credit, I think it was a good thing that Plotkin played this way, because at this point with 4 minutes on the clock, if you don't come up with some kind of tactical shot, something that forced the action immediately, you're just going to lose the game. So even if knight takes f2 doesn't work, I like it considering how low on time he was. So I take the horse. We get queen to c5, king g3, and now we get the move rook to f8. Now here, it might look a little bit scary because the queen and the rooks are coming over. I have these two towers that are on the wrong side of the board, but the two bishops and the queen coming to the center of the board here, the king is completely safe on the h file. We get queen f2, I go king to h2, and now we get the move knight to f4. Black has basically run out of time here. If you play h6, I simply go rook to f1, queen goes away, and worst case, I simply trade the rooks, take the pawn here, and my king is just safe on h2, and I have an extra bishop on the board. So we get knight to f4. Now I play rook to f1, and here Plotkin resigns because there's no queen takes g2. I simply take, and now I have two extra pieces on the board. And if black goes queen takes bishop, I take the knight, guarding my queen. If black trades, we're in an endgame where I have an extra knight. And if black plays queen d1, I can always just trade the rooks and play even bishop to f4, for example. With the extra piece and none of black's pieces anywhere near this white king on h2, I will win in a couple of turns. So after rook to f1, I get the win. I now am tied for the lead once again with 3.5 points out of 4. This game had some ups and downs, but I would say that in general, I had a lot of control. Perhaps I wasn't as aggressive as I should have been. I think I will add that this is one of the issues with playing slightly lower rated players. If I were playing someone like a Praggnanandhaa, someone at the very top, I probably would have been very aggressive with h4, h5 right away, but I figured I could sort of relax, take it a little bit slower, and it worked out, but I'm still not thrilled with how I got there. Nevertheless, a win is a win, so I'm now tied for the lead. Tomorrow, we will have 2 more games, the last 2 games of this Maritime Open being held here in Prince Edward Island. But so far, we've knocked out 4 more games. We now have 7 games remaining on our road to the candidates before we qualify and earn that rating spot. So all's well that ends well. Big props, of course, to my opponent who made the draw in the 3rd round. Once again, Mike Ivanov, who I believe also has 3.5 points out of 4 and is in the hunt to win this tournament. So that's going to do it with our second recap here from Prince Edward Island. I would also like to give a big shout out to all the fans who have been here in person. You know, it's not often that I have the chance to play a tournament in a place like this. It's a place that doesn't have a big chess culture. They probably don't have many major chess tournaments. So it's always a great opportunity to give back. And so I want to give a big shout out to all the locals here who have really enjoyed the chess and been really, really nice and encouraging. And that's going to do it for right now. So we'll be back tomorrow with our final recap here from Prince Edward Island. But so far, everything is going according to plan. Hope you guys enjoyed the recap. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we'll be back with another recap after tomorrow's final 2 rounds of the Maritime Open. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and have a great rest of your day. See you. Bye.